Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and His pure Immaculate Ahlul Bayt. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'll start with a very brief summary of what we've gone through in the last two lectures, inshallah, just in case some of you are new. So we started with Imam Khomeini's letter to the then President of the Soviet Union. And we said this letter was addressed to the West in general, and it was a manner of how to invite the West to Islam. And by the West, okay, we mean the non-Muslims in the West, but also Muslims who have been brought up in the West. This approach of introducing Islam isn't only confined to the non-Muslims in the West, even for the Muslims in the West. Because even the Muslims, the education they receive, the schools, universities they go, from childhood to adulthood, the system is different. It's a different system to how children in the East are being taught. Here, for example, in America and other countries in the West, be you a Muslim or a non-Muslim, being brought up in the educational system here, you learn, they teach you to criticize everything, evaluate everything, question everything. Now, if you want to introduce Islam to such people, and it's not a bad thing either, it's good. But when you want to introduce Islam to such people, the manner differs to when you want to introduce it to countries in the East, for example. Anyway, Imam then said the key to how to attract the West to Islam, in order to invite them to Islam, the key lies in the Urafa. The key lies in Irfan. And he gave a few names. And we said Irfan and Sufism, for now, let's treat them as synonyms. They're one and the same thing. And most of the scholars believe that. Only Imam gives one or two minor differences between Irfan and Sufism. We'll cover that inshallah later. And Sufism, Irfan being one layer of Islam. It's not a separate religion. It's one layer of the religion of Islam. The same way that the Sharia is one layer, albeit a superficial layer. Sufism is an esoteric layer of Islam. Then we touched upon the practical dimension of Sufism. We gave a definition. We went into the practical dimension of Sufism. We said this practical side of Sufism is also called Sayr wa Suluk, a kind of spiritual traveling, wayfaring. And we introduced the idea it's a kind of traveling to Allah, and then we stopped here, and there were many marginal points we covered during the way. Okay. Now this journeying, this traveling that is involved and within Sufism, it's not on a par naturally with the horizontal traveling that we usually do every day from X city to Y city and so on and so forth. The journeying that is intended in Sufism and Irfan, it's a form of vertical traveling. Okay, but this vertical traveling too, this vertical journey shouldn't be looked upon as it being within the physical geometrical domain, from, let's say, one lower realm to space or to the moon. It's not that kind of vertical journeying either. It's nothing to do with the physical realm. This journeying that we want to do in Sufism, it's a divine vertical elevation of the spirit. The spirit is ascending. So when we say vertical elevation, it's something immaterial, not a physical reality. And you're not elevating in place, for example, from Earth to the moon. It's an elevation in spiritual rank, getting closer and closer to Allah. Now, Allah has no place. Allah's everywhere. Don't think that Allah is up in the skies or it's nothing like that. So this is a spiritual ascension to acquire this proximity to Allah. It's an elevation in position. Position meaning in rank, in spiritual status. So in chapter 19, verse 57, وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا, and we elevated him, we raised him to a high position, high rank. مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا. This is in relation to Prophet Idris alayhi salam, who was one of the earlier prophets. This elevation in relation to Prophet Idris, he didn't go to a higher place. Because Prophet Idris underwent an occultation, ghaibah, although all prophets undergo occultation. And the reason is because they're manifestations of Allah's attributes, and one of Allah's attributes is al-ghaib. Anyway, here, this elevation of Prophet Idris alayhi salam, he didn't go to a higher planet during his occultation. He was here, he was still on earth, amongst the people, but he was in occultation. The traditions say he was in the fourth heaven during this occultation. Fourth heaven, don't go up physically either. Don't think if you keep on traveling up in space, you'll find that heaven. The material realm has no end. I'll come to that in a minute. He was in occultation, he was in the fourth heaven. If you paid attention carefully to the previous two lectures, heaven and hell, products of the soul, results of one's spiritual ascension. It's all about the soul here. So he was in the fourth heaven, no problem. There's nothing contradictory to being on earth and being in heaven at the same time. These people had it whilst awake. For us, it's usually after physical death, because we're drowned in the material life. These people have it whilst living here. He was in the fourth heaven. He was in occultation. We raised him to a high position. Now the interesting point is this. I'm not sure if this is a commonly held belief amongst all scholars, but amongst the Urafa it is. Prophet Idris was a prophet. He went into occultation. When he reappeared again, he was no longer merely or only a Nabi, a prophet. After occultation, on reappearance, on being elevated to a high degree during occultation, he was now called a Rasul. And the name he acquired on becoming a Rasul is Ilyas. So Idris and Ilyas is the same person. But after occultation, due to that elevation of spiritual rank, now he's a Rasul and he was called Ilyas. And both names are in the Quran. Now, here Ayatollah Hassanzadeh raises a very delicate point, very subtle point. He says, and the same has happened and will happen to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Because Prophet Isa, he also, but although he was a Rasul also to start off with, but he went into occultation. He is in occultation. Some traditions speak of the fourth heaven. He's in the fourth heaven. Here, when Prophet Isa, Allah says the same will happen to Prophet Isa. And he says this bears secrets within this matter, so deliberate upon it. He doesn't give what those secrets are. But if you study the story of Idris and what happened there, and in his occultation, some things may happen. Now, in relation to the occultation and the reappearance of Prophet Isa, there are some differences even amongst the Urafa. The majority, once they believe that Prophet Isa lives now on earth in the flesh and will reappear, some Urafa don't believe that. They believe he has passed away and he will reappear, but it's not a physical reappearance. And I covered that in the Raj'at series for those who are interested. In any case, this raf'ah, this elevation of Prophet Idris wasn't of place, it was of status. In chapter 58, verse 11, this immaterial vertical journeying is referred to again. يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ. Allah raises those who have Iman, faith amongst you, وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ, and those who have been given knowledge. Allah raises these people darajatin, in degrees, depending on the function of that knowledge and faith and knowledge that one has. Everyone to their own degree and capacity. Now, this elevation in this verse too, that Allah raises these people, Allah's not raising them physically. He's not elevating them to a physical place, because there's no value in that. When people go with Apollo, for example, on the moon, if they go on Saturn one day, Jupiter, all these planets, even further beyond this, let's say to another galaxy, do they become religious people when they come back? Do they become holy people? No. This elevation is spiritual in degree, nothing to do with the physical. And this physical elevation has no end. There's no end. If you keep on going up physically, just keep on going, keep on. You'll never come to an end, with a sign saying, this is the end. The physical realm has no limit. It's infinite. There is no end. Yarhamakumullah. So, and here we see that knowledge and faith have a role in one's existential elevation. Chapter 35, verse 10, again just referring to this elevation. إِلَيْهِ يَسْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ. To him, to Allah, ascends the pure words, which the Mufassirin, the commentators of the Quran, say it's in relation to faith, the pure words. So to Allah do pure words, do this faith ascend. وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحِ يَرْفَعُهُ. And righteous actions elevate them, elevate that faith. Now what does this mean? It's all to do with faith and actions. These two come hand in hand. Faith or knowledge builds the essence of what you are, that I. Actions build your body in all the succeeding realms of existence after this physical realm. The body that you will have in Barzakh, in Qiyamah, and so on and so forth. It's not a physical body according to Arafah, but there is a body. This body is built on a par with your actions in this world. If you remember the concept of tajassumul a'mal, the embodiment of one's actions, you are your actions. قَالَ يَا نُوحُ إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ إِنَّهُ عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. I don't want to keep on repeating all these. Your actions, depending on what they were, they will build your body in Barzakh onwards. If you acted like a pig, Your body will be that of a pig. Here in this physical world, everyone's phenotype is similar to one another. However, in the succeeding realms, it's the embodiment of our actions. It's not a physical body, but there is a body. And that will cause pain if you are a pig, if you are a wolf, if you are a fox, or this will cause you pain, snakes, and so on and so forth, depending on your actions. Each action has its own embodiment. Now, one point just to mention here. So there's always a body. The I, the essence of what we are, is always in association with a body, with a jism, with a body. But it doesn't mean this body has to be physical. The body in this physical realm, since this realm is physical, the body will be physical. That same body, the body is a substance. It's not a physical thing. It's a potential substance. This body, which was physical in this world, because this realm is a physical realm, this same body will be semi-immaterial in Barzakh. It's not a different body. It's the same body. Just now you've transcended to a higher realm. There's no physicality anymore, but it's the same body. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, your actions build your body. Your knowledge builds the I, and these come one in one together. So we want to elevate in rank, in spiritual status, not in physical place. We want to ascend whilst living in this world. That's the aim, to ascend spiritually and see. We want to see the metaphysical truths, not with the physical eye. We want to see the metaphysical truths. If we see, we can taste. And if we taste, we grow. But it's not a physical seeing. Now, chapter 53, verse 35, أَعِنْدَهُ إِلْمُ الْغَيْبِ فَهُوَ يَرَى. Does he possess the knowledge of the unseen? Does one possess knowledge of the unseen so that he sees? You see, in order to qualify as one who sees, not the physical seeing, you have to have knowledge of the unseen. Only then you will qualify as a seer. Otherwise, animals see, non-Muslims see, every munafiq, they see that the physical seeing is of no importance. There's no value in it. Ants see, all animals see, and so on and so forth. Although, okay, bats don't see, but they have other means. But here we have to see this seeing, which in this verse is assigned value, is knowledge of the unseen. If you have access to that, now you are a seer. Now you see the metaphysical truths whilst in this world, but not with the physical eye. Now this has value. Chapter 17, 72, وَمَنْ كَانَ فِي هَذِهِ أَعْمَى. Whoever has been blind in this world, فَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ أَعْمَى. They're going to be blind in the hereafter. It doesn't mean one who is physically blind in this world, they will be blind in the hereafter. That doesn't make sense. One who never gained access whilst living in this world to the metaphysical truths, each person to their own capacity, they're not going to receive anything significant in the hereafter. They're still going to be blind. You have to acquire these virtues in this world and take it with you to the hereafter. If you're going to be blind in this world, it won't be much of a difference in the hereafter. And if you do go to heaven, it's no problem, but it's going to be a very materialistic heaven. That's all you're going to be occupied with. So, the question is, how can we raise ourselves to such a degree so we see? We want to see in order to grow. How do we do that? The answer is to be born twice. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. Mutu qabla an tamutu. Die before you die. This first imperative to die, it's a spiritual death. Before you undergo the physical death, whilst living in this world, undergo the spiritual death. Death meaning transition from one realm to another, this physical realm to an immaterial realm. But whilst living in this world, mutu, die. And then when you die, this spiritual death, you'll be born again. Now, there's a tradition which explains this, well, describes it rather, from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. La yalija malakut as-samawati wal-ard man lam yulad marratain. One who's not born twice will not gain access to the dominions of the heavens and earth. You have to be born twice. Die before you die. Detach yourselves from the physical realm in order to be able to ascend. That's the definition of death. For all of us, usually, it's after physical death that we can ascend to Barzakh. Because on physical death, we all automatically detach from the physical realm. And so we all go to Barzakh. But that's of no value. Die before you die. And no more akhul maut. Another divine tradition gives one an important principle here. Sleep is death's brother. They share the same mechanisms. Because in sleep too, you automatically become detached from the physical world. That's why in your sleep you ascend. Everyone, Muslim or not, Muslim or non-Muslim, once you sleep, that automatic detachment from the physical realm results, everyone ascends. And then we go into the realm of dreams and so on and so forth. So you have to be born again. Actually, there are these Christians called born-again Christians. So you have to rate them very highly because they've undergone this. So here, this being born twice is something specific to human beings. Animals don't have this capacity. But most human beings may never be born that second birth because they never died the spiritual death before dying physically. We have to be careful not to be on a par with animals. At the end of the day, we have to differentiate ourselves, especially spiritually, from animals. Animals sleep. We sleep. Make sure that your sleep isn't confined to the biological sleep that animals have. Ar-ru'ya juz'un minan nubuwwah. Dreaming is a component of prophethood. You're ascending when you dream. It's important. You can benefit a lot in your dream. Islam has a pedagogical scheme of things for you when you sleep. It's not only the biological, animalistic sleep that Islam intends for humans. It wants much more. Why does the Sharia say do wudu before sleeping? Is it just willy-nilly? It's preparing you for an ascension in your sleep. Ar-ru'ya juz'un minan nubuwwah. It says recite this salawat, recite this verse, this chapter. There's a reason for doing this. To prepare yourselves. Don't sleep just like animals. Animals eat. We eat. But we shouldn't eat like animals. Eat slowly, in small morsels, irrespective of whether you're alone or with other people. Even your eating, you're shaping your resurrection when you eat morsel after morsel. It's mustahab, for example, to eat slowly. And small morsels, chew it, let's say 40, 50 times, whatever. You're becoming more and more human when you eat like that. But when you eat fast, in large morsels, swallowing it very quickly, from morsel to morsel, moment to moment, you're becoming more animalistic and shaping an animalistic resurrection. And the reason in Islam it's not good to eat alone, I mean, it's not, there's nothing ethically wrong with it, but the reason why prophets, for example, would always eat with others, and this instruction applies to us too, it's good to do, not to eat alone, because when you eat alone, the probability of you enhancing those animalistic trends of eating is much higher than when you're with others. Animals, well, they don't talk, but they produce sounds. We produce sounds too. We shouldn't shout when we speak with people, with your neighbor, especially with your family, children, and so on. Always speak, at a calm voice, don't shout. And also, when you're in the house and someone is in one part of the room and the other is on the other side of the house and they want to call one another, don't speak like that by shouting. First of all, it's not good for the children to see that. And we're humans, we can just walk and speak with one another and say what we want. I mean, sometimes one has to, in a situation, okay, these exceptions are okay, but don't make this a habit. And animals have sex, we have sex, but we have to control it in a proper manner. It has its own etiquette, and we shouldn't just execute these actions or exercise them like animals do. There's a set of etiquettes involved here. We're humans. This is a process, a phenomenon which is important. For once, even wayfaring, it has to be done properly. The Sharia comes with guidelines and so on and so forth. Now, this being born again twice, we see this in the Bible too. In John chapter 3, verses 1 to 3. I'll just read this with your permission. There was a man from the Pharisees. I think the Pharisees are, for example, the canon-abiding people, like those who abide by the Sharia. I think so. There was a man from the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. The same man came to Jesus, alayhi salam, by night, and said unto him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher, come from God, for no man can do these miracles that you do, save that God be with him. Jesus alayhi salam answered to him, Verily I say to you, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. You have to be born again to see. أَعِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ الْغَيْبِ فَهُوَ يَرَى. Does he have knowledge of the unseen so that he sees? Okay. Now, the next verse, we're still speaking about this concept in relation to the practical dimension of Sufism, this concept of journeying and traveling. I'm just giving you different aspects to this concept to familiarize everyone. That this journeying is important. We have to travel. Chapter 4, verse 100. Now this is a very interesting verse which Imam Khomeini has given a very, very subtle commentary to this verse in many of his works, but this one I've extracted from his Adab al-Salat, which has been translated into English. Chapter 4, verse 100. مَن يَخْرُجْ مِن بَيْتِهِ. Whoever exits one's house. مُهَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Whilst emigrating towards Allah. Emigrating. This concept of journeying again. Towards Allah and His Messenger. ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتِ. Then is overtaken by death. فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Verily, his reward is upon Allah. Allah will reward him. Imam starts with the exoteric, superficial understanding of this verse. And he says, in those days and even today, let's say someone is being oppressed for whatever reason and can't practice Islam, and therefore exits his house to go to Darus Salam, somewhere where he can practice Islam. Now, be it in Mecca, Medina, or today, for example, in anywhere. Although I'm not saying you're being oppressed, alhamdulillah, you can practice Islam here. Although in England they can practice Islam better. It's more freer in England. Well, England is a very small country. It may be even smaller than Florida. And if you're in a place which is smaller than Florida, the whole country, with 5 to 10 million Muslims, Islam can disseminate much better. And that's what's happening there. We have members of parliament who are Muslims, and it's councillors, a lot of political figures, and alhamdulillah, it's good. Inshallah, in the future, with your children, when they enter the political arena, albeit from a grassroots level, maybe they can start as local councillors. I'm not saying for them to start by, entering the presidential race or anything, but, from a grassroots level, they have to make an effort, and they have to care for even the fellow American non-Muslims. You're American at the end of the day. You can't deny yourselves that. I mean, you're not Iranian. You're all born and bred here. And you have to have this sympathy and care for your fellow Americans. There's no point in having this hate. Okay, hate in relation maybe to foreign policy of the government, other aspects of the government, yes. And that's not a Muslim thing to attack the foreign policy of the government. Even non-Muslims do it. And actually maybe non-Muslims are demonstrating more than Muslims in this country against many policies of the government. There you can make your share, participate with your fellow Americans, and so on and so forth. But still, there has to be this love and compassion to your neighbor, those at work, at the workplace, at university. You have to teach this compassion to your children. Everything has its own place. Anyway, someone's being oppressed and they flee their home because of this oppression. And they want to go to a place where they can practice religion and be safe from the oppressor. Whilst they emigrate to this Darus Salam, to this place of a haven of security and peace of Islam and everything, they die on their way. They're overtaken by death. These people will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, that's a superficial understanding. It's not absolute though. Many people may flee their homes for non-divine reasons. It's possible. Even if such people die on the way, they won't be rewarded by Allah. We can't take the superficial meaning in absolute terms. It's like the martyr, the shaheed. There's a fiqhi shaheed, which has its own rulings associated with it. Someone goes to war, dies in the battlefield. Okay, they have no ghusl. They're a shaheed in fiqh. Whether or not they are a shaheed in Irfan, that by merely going to war and dying at the battlefield, that's not a given. Someone may go to the war for personal gain, and we've had plenty of that during history. Anyway, here, this was the superficial verse, and Imam speaks about it to some degree. Then Imam, more importantly, enters the esoteric inner realities of this verse. He says, مَا يَخْرُجْ مِنْ بَيْتِهِ, whoever exits one's house. Now, Bayt in other traditions has been referred to as the soul. Now, just one point before I start giving this esoteric interpretation by Imam. Esoteric interpretations of verses of the Holy Quran can only be given by the Ma'sumin. Okay. But that doesn't stop a scholar with his own proper standard process of extrapolation to bring an esoteric interpretation, not a exoteric, not tafsir. But he can't say this is it 100%. He has to say maybe this is one meaning. And for those who have read 40 hadith, especially in the beginning, Imam keeps on saying maybe this is the meaning, maybe that is the meaning. One can never say for 100%. These are understandings, albeit via standard principles that scholars have come up with. Because bait has been used to refer to the soul in some traditions, whoever exits one's soul, one's ego, whilst emigrating spiritually to Allah. Okay, now this is an esoteric interpretation now. You eliminate the ego, you exit your ego, and travel in the process. As a result of eliminating one's ego, you travel towards Allah, then you're overtaken by death, esoterically. Meaning, after you eliminate the ego, traveling to Allah, now you ascend to a higher realm, death. Now you're becoming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, it's not the physical death anymore. Mutu, qabla an tamutu. That occurs as a result of that elimination of one's ego. Thumma yudrikuhu, then when you enter, when death is overtakes you, and you ascend a higher realm whilst living in this realm, that will be rewarded by Allah. And that is absolute. It doesn't take exceptions like with this superficial understanding. Now some people may say, okay, now you've spoken about all this journeying, how do we start? Imam writes, the first, now this is based on the presumption that you've mastered the Sharia. What I mean by mastering the Sharia is that now you don't sin intentionally. Okay, everyone sins, I sin, you sin now and again. It happens, we're weak. But the doors are always open. We should never lose hope, whoever you are. But when you've mastered the Sharia, for a few months has passed now, and you haven't sinned intentionally, okay? Once you've built that strong scaffolding, the next step, it will be easier for you to do. Now here Imam writes, the first prerequisite to journeying, okay? The first prerequisite to suluk, that's the Farsi word he used in the book. The first prerequisite to journeying to Allah, suluk el Allah, is exiting this station. Ma yakhruj min baytihi, that station of egoism, that has to be exited. And what a first step this is. Moreover, the criterion in differentiating between haqqi disciplines, haqqi true ascetic practices, and batil void disciplines is this element of exiting this station. You see someone who has different claims of irfan with him. You're not sure, is this a haqqi trend that he's exhibiting, or is it void? The way to tell you this is an important key Imam is giving you here. He's saying, look at his egoism. Does he have an ego problem? If the ego problem is there, his practices are void. Don't look so highly. Don't treat him as that highly. I mean, don't disrespect him. This is a guide for you, just to distance yourself from someone who has all these claims. Whoever it's going to be, the key is evaluate their ego. Is he always saying, I am this, I am that, I did this, I did that, I'm better than him, he's bad, he's weak, for no reason, just criticizing people and making everyone inferior, and he's superior to all. And then Imam says, whichever traveler, the traveler to Allah, steps along the line of egocentrism. There's a difference between egoism and egocentrism. Well, the Arabic is ananiya and inniya. But with egoism, it's I am better than him. I am superior. It's I am superior in whatever thing. With egocentrism, you have to be the center of everything around you. The people, the workplace, everyone has to do things for you. All actions surrounding you have to be centralized to you. That's how you see the world. They're both wrong. Egoism is wrong, has to be eliminated. Egocentrism has to be eliminated. Imam writes, whichever traveler steps along the line of egocentrism and wayfares, travels within the veils of egoism, their disciplines are void, and their journeying is not ilallah, it's not to Allah, but rather it's ilan-nafs, it's to their own ego. They're traveling to their own ego, enhancing it. As the tradition goes, the mother of idols is the idol of yourself. Now, we have a lot of traditions on how to tame one's ego and how to eliminate it. Unfortunately, I didn't bring one of my books where I've listed some of these traditions, but one of them, which is in Sheikh Saduq's Khisal, I remember. I don't remember the whole hadith, but it gives 10 attributes of the true Abid, the true servant of Allah. The 10th one was this, that whoever one encounters, they always say, and this part of the Arabic I remember, فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ مِنِّي. Whoever they encounter, wherever they encounter it, they say, he's better than me. This is an ethical instruction. This is a spiritual instruction. Whoever you encounter, wherever, this has to be your story. He's better than me. These are all mechanisms of eliminating one's ego. But now just see how people react today. Everyone has this degree at the end of it, has this degree of egoism within them. It's very difficult to totally eliminate it. But to the capacity that you manage to eliminate it, to that capacity you will grow spiritually, inshallah. Then Imam says, as long as one's soul bears affinity to itself, and there is a degree of awareness of egoism, one is yet to become a traveler. You haven't started this journeying to Allah yet. And as long as traces of egocentrism is mentally occupying the traveler, and the walls of the city of one's eye and the adhan of self-centeredness has not become hidden, one will still be ruled as a resident and not a traveler. Because in fiqh, you become a traveler once you pass the permit zone. What's the permit zone? And then your salat will be shortened. You don't fast anymore. It's when the walls of the last houses of that city are now hidden, or you don't hear the azan. Imam very eloquently, as he said, as long as the walls of the city of one's eye isn't hidden, you can still see the walls of egoism. Or the adhan of egocentrism, of self, it's not hidden. You can still hear the adhan of self-centeredness. I'm not sure if I've been able to convey the point. But as long as you haven't, if these are not hidden, if that adhan of self-centeredness, if the walls of one's ego, if it doesn't become hidden, you're still a hadir. You're still a resident. You're not a musafir, a spiritual musafir. So then the question now is that how do we eliminate the ego? All this, you see, all these were all preliminary points, gradually getting to this point now. We have to eliminate the ego. Now, how do we do that? Okay, we start with the Sharia. You look carefully in the Sharia, many rulings in the Sharia The underlying rationale in these rulings is that your ego becomes eliminated. Not to anger your parents, not to cause them harm, not to shout at them. So this is difficult. You live with them every day. Suddenly you explode. It happens. Suddenly you break their hearts, Allah forbid. Well, these are sins. These are Sharia sins. Now, you going to university studying something which your parents don't want you to study, and then they become disappointed. That won't be a sin. It has to be causing them anger, something which the common layperson regards as harming your parents. This, they unnecessarily are becoming angry or disappointed. That according to the Sharia. But spiritually, if you want to elevate yourselves, even that kind of harm or anger, spirituality wants from you not even to cause that degree of harm or disappointment to your parents, even though the Sharia doesn't want that, doesn't ask for you, for that from you. But when it comes to spirituality, yes. Spirituality, Irfan, Sufism wants you to be a slave to your parents. Now, okay, to be that 100%, it's very difficult. I'm not expecting everyone here to do that. I just want you to know this is what Sufism's about. It wants you to be a slave to them. Now, your wajib duty is to abide by the Sharia. But don't like Irfan for the fun of Irfan. Don't get excited with Sufism for the fun of Sufism, just because it's exciting and these nice words are being said. Only action will elevate you and make you a Sufi. If you want to be a Sufi, you have to act like a Sufi. You have to act like an Arif. Mere knowledge is of no benefit. See what the Arifs want from you. How they tell you to treat your parents, especially the mother. Now, Imam Khomeini has an incredible passage in one of his speeches in relation to the mother. I have it somewhere here in Florida, but I want to read from it because the words are very eloquent. Inshallah, if I recall, I'll bring it. So we want to eliminate the ego. What's the way? Chapter 33, verse 21. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ يَرْحَمُكُمُ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. In the Messenger of Allah, verily, there is a good example for you. That's the way. The way of the Messenger of Allah. It's not that complicated. You don't have to go too far. And in chapter 3, verse 31, قُلْ, say, O Prophet, إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ Allah, if you want to love Allah, فَاتَّبِعُونِي, follow me. The Prophet is saying, يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ, Allah will love you. Follow me, the Holy Prophet said. The focus is on the person of the Holy Prophet. Someone who was born 1400 years ago, had a mother, had a father, had grandparents, ancestors, and who was born ma'soom at birth. Follow me. Now, this much I'll stop here because I want to open a dilemma and then do the words of bereavement, so I don't want to go too far with this. I'll continue from here tomorrow, inshallah. Follow me. The focus is on a person who was born 1400 years ago, like me and you, had parents, grandparents. This person was born ma'soom. Don't say, well, God made him ma'soom. God doesn't just work like that. He has ways of working things. In procreation, there's 1,001 different parameters that have to occur before. No, it's not a case that it just happens. Ismat, infallibility, occurred at birth. Why? Why were they ma'soom at birth? There's a reason for that. We have to understand this. This I'll open tomorrow, because this then has incredible lessons to take for us when we have offspring. And this, inshallah, I'll open tomorrow. Okay, before these words of bereavement which I'll recite, there's one question that I commonly receive, and that's being in the days of Fatimiyya now. It's in relation to women. Although last year I was here, I did speak about the issue of women, and I did raise many of the dilemmas and questions and shubahat in relation to women, and we covered quite a bit. But this one I didn't cover, and it is one that they ask a lot, and this is in relation to the hitting of women that is mentioned in the Quran. وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ, hit them. What does this mean? It's incredible. Some interpretations of different things in Islam, the concept of muta, the concept of polygamy, this concept of hitting, it's been taken out of control. These things are, they're facts. I mean, they exist, but not everything that is permissible, it doesn't mean it's good to do. And then when you want to do them, there are so many different aspects one has to consider, but we only focus usually on the animalistic aspect and forget even sometimes the fiqhi aspect to these things. These things have to be discussed, because if taken out of control, and if it's always going to be interpreted one-sided, well, it's only natural that then women may come and say, well, is this Islam? And I get many emails in this regard. And my advice is to the women who give me these, some of these women are very harsh. And they say, we don't want this kind of Islam. And although I understand why they say that, but just because what they see from their husbands, their family, male members, or what they hear here and there, it doesn't mean that is true Islam. Always give benefit of the doubt. Always be ready to hear what is, other different interpretations in this regard. Don't come to a conclusion quickly. Although some sisters are very patient and they ask, what does Islam say about it? They don't run into their own conclusions. You have to be careful here. Because if you fall into your own conclusions, it will be very difficult to come out of them. Now, we raised some questions last year in these themes. Here, I only want to comment on this concept of hitting. Now, hitting in general is haram, especially if it involves the color of your skin changing, and especially if it involves bruising, even a redness of the skin. This entails a blood money that you have to give to the person. Qisas exists here. So this is one thing to take in mind, that Islam is against hitting, especially from that initial redness onwards, because any hitting below that threshold would hardly cause any pain. You can't cause pain to others. Harming others is haram in Islam. That's one point. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, said, he has one or two traditions here, ayadribu ahadukum al-mar'ata thumma yadhillu mu'aniqaha. How is it that one of you will hit the woman, one's wife, for example, and then you hold onto her into your arms, explaining the apparent contradiction between hitting and holding her in your arms. One is of affection, the other is disaffection. One is compassion. The other is the opposite of compassion. And so here in this tradition we see that's not the line. Hitting isn't part of Islam. Also, in another prophetic tradition, he says, Inni ata'ajjabu. I'm surprised. Mimma yadrib imra'atahu wa huwa bidarb awla minha. I'm surprised of a man who hits his wife, his woman, and in relation to being hit, he deserves to be hit more than the woman. La tadribu nisa'akum. He continues, don't hit your women. Bil khashab, with wood. Now I'll explain that, don't panic, I'll explain that in a minute. فَإِنَّ فِيهِ الْقِصَاص. Because by doing so, when you hit with wood, by doing so it will cause redness of the skin or even more, and that has qisas, retaliation. And they have to hit you, or you have to give them the blood money. وَلَكِنْ, rather than hitting, rather اضربوهن, and in the verse of the Quran it says وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ, hit them بِالْجُوءِ وَالْأُرَى, by means of hunger and absence of clothing. I'll explain all this in a minute. Let's first get the translation over with, and then we'll go into the explanation. By an absence of feeding and an absence of clothing. حَتَّى تُرِيهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ, so that you may be at peace. تُرِيهُ, at peace, comfortable in the world and in the hereafter. Okay. So, hitting is haram. Causing pain is haram. In chapter 4, verse 34, let me go through all the different dimensions and then it will all fall together. You just have to pay attention here. In Islam, the man, under the umbrella of the nafaqah, the maintenance that he has to do in relation to the woman, he has 101 wajib duties to do. Sharia wajib duties. The woman only has 2. Everything else, nothing else is wajib. Only has 2 wajib duties. One of them, and this is the main one, the other one isn't even really applicable. But one of them, and this is the main one, is that she can't, without excuse, refrain from providing sexual gratification to one's husband without excuse. I mean, if there's an excuse, she's not feeling well, she's ill, this, that, and the other, that's okay. In fiqh, if a woman, now this is the Sharia, if a woman, without an excuse, refuses this sexual gratification to the husband can reduce her nafaqah on a par with how much she is refraining. Now the nafaqah is food, clothing, and shelter. It's the man's responsibility. The woman before marriage was used to the standard of her household. Before marriage, she was used to a level of eating meat, having fruit, buying clothes, and different other things. That has to be maintained after marriage. It can't go below that. It has to be maintained. The man doesn't have to provide for more than how she grew up with, food-wise, clothing-wise, shelter-wise, and other things too, travel and so on and so forth. But the man has to provide that which she had. It's called maintenance. That's why it's called maintenance. You're maintaining what she had. It's wajib. And there are many things. Food itself, the provision of food has scores of wajib things to do. I just don't want to go through them. shelter, clothing, and so on and so forth. If she compromises with this one wajib duty, what's that? Without an excuse, refraining from intercourse, and so on and so forth. If she refrains, the man can reduce the nafaqah. The holy tradition is saying hit them, but not a physical hitting. Hit them by hunger and clothing, or absence of clothing. It means you reduce their nafaqah. Well, what if they earn for themselves? Well, that's it. It'll be useless. If they earn for themselves, it's a lost cause now. And whatever they earn, it's their money. It's not yours. If you want to spend their money, it'll always be a debt upon the man. Anyway. So it's saying hit them in this way. It means a reduction of the nafaqah. Now, if they do, in chapter 4, verse 34, it says, if they do, you fear misconduct from them. This fearing of misconduct is that you fear that they are, without excuse, refraining to gratify you. And not only if they do it once, it doesn't apply there. You really, it's keep on continuing after a period of time. Now you're fearing this. Not when they do it, only one time. So when they refrain from this gratification, Quran says, فَإِذُوا, advise them. Look at the Quran here. The Quran now is giving a set of protocols, what to do. It doesn't start by hitting, and hitting meaning that reduction of nafaqah. It says, no, you have to speak with them leniently, smoothly, compassionately. What's your problem? What can I do to alleviate this? You speak with them, two human beings. Now, these are all steps of Amr Ma'ruf now. The Quran is outlining here. If that doesn't work, وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ. First, فَعِذُوهُنَّ. Then, advising them. Then, وَهْجُرُوهُنَّ. Turn away from them in bed. Now, in Amr Ma'ruf, if you giving Amr Ma'ruf, you believe it won't be of any benefit, it won't have any effect, it will be totally useless, there's no duty for you to do it. Here the Quran says turn away in bed, so that maybe she will continue like she did before. But it has to have an effect on her. It's a very delicate point here. I mentioned with the third step. And then with the third, if that doesn't work, hit them. Now hit them, one interpretation, that's the interpretation I've given, is this, reduce the nafaqah, and we have it in the Sharia. There is another interpretation of hitting, because hitting, zarb, has many meanings in Arabic. One is pressing upon them, placing your hands on them. It doesn't cause any redness, it doesn't cause any pain. Another is, hitting them. And in some traditions, it says hitting with a toothbrush. Now, a toothbrush, how they would use it is about this size. So I brought this too. Although this is not wood, it's a pen. I'm not giving, I don't want to teach you how to hit or anything. I've given you the interpretation. That is the reduction of the nafaqah. I'm just saying, if you do hear of other interpretations, I just want to explain those. So they would hit with a wooden toothbrush. It's possible. This is one possible meaning. But hitting with a wooden toothbrush has no pain. Look, it doesn't say poking with a toothbrush. It says hitting. If this is a wooden, if I were to hit, however hard, the pain is very limited. But now this is a plastic thing. May cause more pain. But the wood of that tree that they would have toothbrushes in those days was very soft. Now, so there's no pain. So why hit them with something which has no pain? That's one question. The second point, when you do Amr Ma'ruf, it has to be of some effect. Now, this is referring to this very important divine point that your relationship, the relationship between man and woman, must be so subtle and delicate that something like hitting with a toothbrush, something such as just turning away, should have an effect for you to do Amr bi-Ma'ruf. But if the relationship is, destroyed in the beginning, even if you were to poke it, it'll have no effect. Or if you were to do anything, well, you've lost out in that relationship. You see? So this verse, which everyone attacks in the West as the most violent of verses, actually was one of the most delicate of verses of the Holy Quran. It's highlighting how to treat women in man and woman relationships. So this is important. You grasping, another interpretation, just grasping upon her, another meaning of zarb. It has to be such that you're grasping her, she will take, say, oh, he's never done that. I'm going to change my ways. That's the relationship Islam wants between man and woman. So that's just what I felt that was important to mention. And I'll just now quickly go through words of bereavement with your permission, and we'll finish, inshallah. So, yes, I think if there's no need to record this, unless you're very keen and they want to listen. Yes. Wait, if you allow me to have the pace of things, yes. Now, yesterday we went through the letter which Omar gave to Muawiyah during his time. And this letter was in Biharul Anwar. Here, Omar is writing to Muawiyah after what had happened. This is during his Khilafah, explaining to Muawiyah what had happened after Saqifah, when Abu Bakr was elected and people came to give allegiance except for the house of Ali alayhi salam. And we were here. وَأَخَذْتُ, Omar is saying this, وَأَخَذْتُ سُوتَ قُنْفُذ. I grabbed hold of Qunfuz's whip. فَزَرَبْتُ, and I hit her. Now you see here, zarb, this hitting here, the context, this was a severe hitting, because this was with a whip.